John Samuel, and I am the CEO of Abler.
Hi, I'm Suzanne Meyer. I'm a disability inclusion consultant and content writer at Abler.
And so we thought we would take a couple minutes to talk about the new course that we just launched called Disability Inclusion, Putting Untapped Talent to Work. And so we thought that, we've been working on this project for the last year almost, and we've been so close to it, but we thought we'd share a little bit of insight about why we did this and how it all came about. So, Suzanne, what kind of questions do you think you have that you think that people would be interested in learning about?
I think really the first thing we should talk about is really why we're doing this and where this came from. And I know when I first joined Abler about a year ago, you've always been talking about this training, and we've been working on it for almost the entire year now. But I don't think we've really ever talked about, you've never really told me the backstory and why you've always wanted to do this. So maybe you could tell people about that a little bit.
I think that's a great question, because when I think about Abler as a whole, the goals of the organization were really to eliminate the digital divide, which we're doing through our digital accessibility services. The next piece was changing the mindsets of organizations and people. And the third piece, the third leg of the business, was to create pathways for employment, which we're going to be doing through our Abler Works. But kind of going back to that change in the mindsets of companies and organizations and people, that really is where I was trying to figure out what's the best way of doing that. And so I started thinking about the trainings. How do we get people at least start having the conversation? So the disability inclusion training that we wanted to launch initially was really focused on how do we get people to first think about it and then have those kind of understand the challenges and start having those difficult conversations. So that was always the purpose of the course to me, like when I first thought about it, was how do we let people know about what to say when you meet people? Because I used to too often when I'd go to networking events, people would be scared to talk to me because the fear of saying the wrong thing would stop them from even just having a conversation with me. And so if we were able to find a safe way to start this conversation, maybe that starts with the training. So I don't know what your thoughts are about that. And you've been writing this from the very beginning. So kind of coming in, this has all changed. So how do you think, that initial thought process to where we are today, how do you think that's going?
Well, I was always really excited about it because there are some trainings, disability inclusion trainings on the market, but I really felt that what was needed was something fresh and modern and personal, and that's really where my kind of perspective was coming in, and that's what we wanted to create. And so really from the beginning, what I didn't really know was how to frame it because I've never really written a training. So in the beginning, it was just a big bucket and throwing everything we knew about disability inclusion and what we would like to see into that big bucket, and then just trying to start to put it together. And I think that's been the most exciting part, is to see it take shape as a training from just this big bucket of here's what we know about disability inclusion and here's what we want to see. And to see it take shape as a training that we can take to people and be like, look, not just this what we know, but here's how we can explain it to you and here's how we can bring it to you.
No, I think that's a really interesting concept because, I think when we started this module, it was what we know. Mm-hmm. But as we expanded, it became what our community knows. So can you talk about, that journey of not just being the subject matter expert, but to the point where you got other people's input and feedback in this whole process?
Yeah, and that was actually that was the most enjoyable part, was that, we at Abler, more than half our staff, I think, have disabilities ourselves. So we have a pretty good idea of what it means to live with disabilities, but we still live in our niche ourselves. We know what we know and we have our experiences, and like everyone else, we sometimes think that, our experiences are the experiences that everyone has. And the danger that, and I noticed that myself, that I fell into, was to think that that's what it was. So what we started doing throughout the process was pulling in other people from not only other disability communities, but other, areas of expertise, and trying to bring as many voices as we could together and trying to bring together as many areas of expertise and points of view, and just hearing from everybody to make sure that what we have to say is really not just us talking, but is really what represents as many people as possible and as many voices as possible, and wanting to make sure that everyone's heard, because really that's in accessibility, we call it inclusive design, and that means, you know, making things accessible to as many people as possible. And in disability inclusion, it's the same thing. We want to be inclusive of as many people as possible, and the way to do that, we feel, is to listen to as many people as we can and include as many voices as we can, and that's what we tried to do.
Yeah, and I think that may have been my favorite part of this as well, was the fact that we were, you know, able to bring in folks from all aspects of the disability spectrum in the community, and their personal stories.
Yeah.
And I think that's what
Yes.
really differentiates our training from others, because it actually has a voice. We humanize this, because again, when I think about what the goal of this was, I never wanted to put a wedge between companies, businesses, and the disability community.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that when you start to hear actual people's stories, it brings a whole new level of that proximity gets closer. You
Yes.
see it's right here. Then you realize that it's people in your own community that you see every day. You just
Yeah.
didn't know that they're part of the disability community. And so I thought
Yeah.
that this was something, hearing those stories really kind of brings it to life
Yeah.
and humanizes it.
And that's what we heard from a lot of people too, was that a lot of people that, you know, a lot of people who aren't part of the disability community, they really think that they've never met a person with a disability, because maybe people, you know, they haven't really heard those voices or those stories for themselves, because they may have taken a course and they may have read statistics, or they may have heard it told to them that there are people with disabilities, but to hear those stories from people themselves, that really makes an impact, and that makes them think that, hey, maybe, you know, maybe there are people around them too that have disabilities. And another thing I want to say about that is that the generosity and the willingness to share and the enthusiasm that we've encountered from the community has just been astonishing. We've worked with so many people who have been mostly volunteers, really. I mean, you know, we'll give them a t-shirt or something, but really they're volunteers. And their enthusiasm and their willingness to contribute has been just overwhelming. And we've really built a community of people that we can now go to with any kind of question or any kind of concern, and we're hoping, you know, that goes both ways, and we're hoping to build that too for the people who will eventually take our course, to build that kind of network for them to have a point of reference when they have a question, when they run into a challenge, to know where to go, who to ask, so that it doesn't end once they finish the course, but that is just the beginning for them to have access to a network and a list of resources and know where to go and what to do next.
No, I agree. I mean, I think that transition to where I want to take this was that this is only the beginning.
Yes.
This is only the first step of raising that awareness, kind of starting that conversation. And so I'm glad you talk about that, because what we're really trying to do at Abler is to provide a community, a resource to help organizations to help remove those barriers. And that's really what we're trying to do, is to remove the barriers so that we can get more folks with disabilities into the workforce and in all aspects of life. And so, you know, as you think about this course right now, where it is and where we're going, what are some of the things that you look forward to kind of in the next stages of the evolution of this training, and whether it be the training itself or other content that we look to provide for our partners?
Well, for a long time I was almost sad that, you know, we were reaching the end of writing the training, but what I've realized is that as we have gone through, like I said, in the beginning when we started writing this training, we had this whole bucket of things that we wanted to say, and we've really had to condense it to make it, you know, bring it to market, because you can't make people sit down for, you know, a week and tell them things. So there's so much more to be said.
Yeah.
And so on the one hand, that's one thing that I really want to do, is I feel like there's, from every single module and every single topic that we're talking about in the training, there are all kinds of spin-off topics and all kinds of things that we can go into more depth. And we're already actually planning all kinds of features, such as blogs and webinars and book clubs and interview series and podcasts and all kinds of exciting things to live on our website eventually. So that's kind of the expansion of it. And the other thing that we've heard a lot from people is that they're really looking for kind of bite-sized pieces. So I think we're going macro, so we're expanding all this, but I think another thing we can do is also take some bits and pieces of this training and make shorter little pieces to be like, hey, here's a 10-minute primer on inclusive language, or here's a 10-minute primer on preparing your workplace for a person with, say, autism coming in to work with you, those kinds of things. So going macro and also going micro.
That's fantastic. So that's a little bit about our course, and we're super excited about it, and we hope that if you want to learn more, email us at info@ablr360.com. Again, that's info@ablr360.com to learn more about our disability inclusion, putting untapped talent to work. And we are super excited to bring this to you because it's something we're very passionate about.